It's all about being beautifully measured. Listen to me carefully. What unfolded at Indian Wells was not just another upset. It was a controlled detonation at the heart of women's tennis. A moment that ripped through the desert air of the BNP Paribas Open and sent shockwaves all the way to Manila. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. It was a declaration. On one side of the net stood Elena Rybakina, world number 3, Wimbledon champion, Paris Masters champion, and Australian Open champion. A 6-foot force of nature, with a serve that sounds like a gunshot echoing off canyon walls. She plays with that icy calm, that expressionless stare that has broken so many opponents before the first changeover. When she steps on court, the expectation is simple: champion and simple dominance. Across from her stood Eala, 20 years old, ranked a career-high number 31 and carrying the hopes of an entire nation. On paper, it looked like a mismatch. Power versus persistence, missile launches versus movement, experience versus youth. The odds makers had already written the ending. They were wrong. Indian Wells is called the 5th Grand Slam for a reason. The desert air is bone dry. The ball rockets through the sky. Then the gritty court surface grabs it and kicks it up high. It's a battlefield that demands more than power. It demands problem-solving under suffocating pressure. It demands lungs, legs, and nerve. Before the first ball was struck, you could feel something different. The stadium wasn't polite. It wasn't subdued. It was alive. Filipino flags waved in clusters across the stands. Chants rolled down from the upper tiers. Every time Eala bounced on her toes at the baseline, the crowd pulsed with her. She wasn't alone out there. She carried Manila with her. Rybakina opened like a storm. First serves in the high 110s. Lines painted with surgical precision. Service games finished in barely a minute. It was first-strike tennis at its most brutal. When Eala served, Rybakina stepped inside the baseline and crushed returns as if she had solved the code already. Flat backhands skidding through the court, forehands punched deep. In a blink, it was a double break. This was the nightmare scenario. But here's where the script caught fire. Eala didn't panic. She didn't rush. She absorbed. Instead of trying to outgun Rybakina, changed the geometry of the court. Higher net clearance, heavy topspin to the backhand, and angles that dragged the Kazakh star off the court inch by inch. She extended rallies from 3 shots to 8 and 8 and from 8 to 12. And something subtle began to shift. Rybakina's timing, so razor-sharp early, started to fray. A forehand clipped the tape. A second serve floated long. A backhand drifted wide by inches. Eala pounced. Her speed became a weapon. She chased down what looked like clean winners and turned them into deep looping replies. She forced one more ball, then one more, then one more. The crowd sensed the momentum swing before the scoreboard fully reflected it. Every extended rally felt like oxygen being siphoned from Rybakina's lungs. Break back, then hold, then another break. The Ice Queen, so composed at the start, was suddenly glancing at her box. Shoulders tightening, first serve percentage dipping. Andy was feeding off the chaos. Eyes locked, feet dancing, fists clenched after every grinding point one. By the time the match tilted completely, it wasn't an accident. It was systematic fists, a systematicis mittling. Eala exposed the one vulnerability rarely discussed. When forced into prolonged exchanges on a high-bouncing, systematic bouncing court, Rybakina's flat lasers lose their bite. The final points weren't frantic. They were fearless. When match point landed and the stadium erupted, it wasn't just applause. It was released. Bouncing released, it was history cracking open in real time. In Manila, streets flooded with celebrations. Released. Phones lit up. Social media detonated. A nation had just watched one of its own stare down a giant and refused to blink. This was not a Cinderella run. This was a warning shot. Eala didn't just beat a champion at Indian Wells. She walked into one of the most intimidating arenas in tennis, solved a puzzle the experts said she couldn't solve, and proved that the future of the WTA isn't politely arriving. It's kicking the door down. The commentators had already begun preparing the obituary. After dropping the first set 6-3, It looked exactly like the script everyone predicted at the BNP Paribas Open. Elena Rybakina was in full command, serving bombs, flattening backhands, and walking to her chair with that familiar, unreadable expression. The crowd had quieted. The energy dipped. This was supposed to be the moment the dream ended. But this is where good players disappear and great ones are born. A lesser player would have stared at the scoreboard and felt small. A younger competitor might have accepted the hierarchy of the sport. A former Grand Slam champion on one side, a rising hopeful on the other, bags mentally packed. Exit door. Locate the exit door is rising. D. Not Alex Eala. During the changeover, she didn't spiral. She didn't rush. She sat down, draped the towel over her head, and slowed everything down. Deep breath, eyes closed. Reset. She understood something critical. Trying to match Rybakina's pace was competitive suicide. Rybakina. The exit door is Rybakina thrives on speed. Beat her flat power, Rybakina's power, and she simply redirects it using your momentum against you like a martial artist. So Eala made a decision that would flip the entire match on its axis. She stopped giving her speech. Power speech. When the second set began, the tactical shift was immediate and brilliant. On return, Eala backed up. Not a step, not two. She retreated deep behind the baseline, almost blending into the desert backdrop. That extra fraction of a second gave her time to read the serve. She abandoned the low percentage return speech. Percentage return winner attempts and focused on one thing, neutralizing the point. Deep ball, middle of the court, reset. Then she changed the geometry of every rally. Instead of driving the ball flat, Eala began rolling heavy topspin percentage return topspin into the corners. At Indian Wells, that gritty surface grabs the ball and explodes it upward. Those looping shots kicked high, uncomfortably high topspin, into Rybakina's strike zone. And here's the nuance. Rybakina, tall and powerful, prefers contact lower in her hitting window. Rybakina's window forces her to strike above shoulder height, and that laser-like flat power becomes far harder to generate. Suddenly, the machine stuttered. Forehands sailed long. Backhands clipped the net. The rhythm, once so clinical, started to fracture. Rybakina was now being asked to create her own pace. Off heavy high balls instead of redirecting clean strikes. Eala sensed it, and she turned the knife, identifying the one subtle crack in Rybakina's armor. Her forward movement. Eala began deploying the drop shot with ruthless precision. First, she would pin Rybakina deep with a heavy topspin forehand. Wait for the plant. Wait for the weight to settle. Then feather. A soft, biting slice that barely cleared the net. Over and over the world, no three were forced to lunge forward, scrambling awkwardly into the forecourt. The desert heat did the rest. Those repeated sprints drained the legs of the 6-foot powerhouse. Breathing grew heavier. Recovery's steps slowed. The crowd felt it building. When Eala secured the early break in the second set, the stadium erupted. Filipino flags whipped through the air. The belief returned louder than before. Momentum is oxygen on the tennis court. And Eala inhaled deeply. From there, she defended like a wall. Impossible to retrieve. Elastic slides. One more ball. Always one more ball. Rybakina's frustration, once hidden behind ice, began to show in small cracks, a glance at the box, a longer stare at the baseline after a miss. Eala took the second set level. And then came the third, not a set but a battle. Both players understood what hung in the balance. For Rybakina, it was control, status, and order. For Eala, it was validation proof that her rise wasn't hype, but substance. Every rally stretched into a test of lungs and nerve. Every hold felt like survival. It became a war of attrition under the California sun. Power versus persistence, height versus heart, experience versus audacity. And with every grinding exchange, one truth became impossible to ignore. The giant was no longer towering. She was wobbling. Before the final set even began at the BNP Paribas Open, there was one last twist. Elena Rybakina took a medical timeout. She walked off court away from the noise, away from the momentum, away from the storm that Alexa had unleashed in that second set. Officially, it was treatment. Unofficially, it was a reset. A chance to cool down the fiery Filipina. A chance to remind the world who she was. When Rybakina returned, she looked sharpened and refocused. The first serve, the weapon that had dictated the opening set, was back with venom. The radar gun lit up. The lines were clipped with authority. For 6 suffocating games, neither woman blinked. 3-all. Every rally felt like it carried the weight of a final. The tension wasn't loud. It was heavy, the kind that presses against your chest, the kind that makes an entire stadium sit frozen between points. Then came the moment of absolute truth. Eala is serving at 34. Out of nowhere, Rybakina detonated 3 return winners in a row. Flat lasers down the line. No hesitation. No mercy. Love 40. Triple break point. This was the script, reasserting itself. This was where the world number 3 was supposed to crush the resistance, break serve, and close the door. The crowd went silent, not out of doubt, but out of fear. But here's what separates contenders from giants. Down love 40-40, facing the edge. Eala delivered the service game of her life. First point, a vicious kick serve wide, jumping high enough to force a rushed error. 15-40, second point, a brutal 25-shot rally that felt like it lasted an hour. Eala chased everything, absorbed everything, refused to miss. Finally, Rybakina blinked, a backhand sailing long, 30-40. The pressure tightened, and on the third break point, Eala did something almost unthinkable against one of the most lethal returners in the sport. She served and volleyed, slicing the serve out wide and immediately sprinting forward. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Rybakina blocked the return back low, but Eala was already there, calm, balanced, punching a forehand volley into the open court. Deuce. The stadium exploded. It wasn't just a point. It was audacity. Tactical brilliance wrapped in pure nerve. She didn't survive that game. She seized it. When she finally held the 44, you could see the mental toll etched subtly across Rybakina's face. Triple break point. Gone. Control slipping. In the very next game, Eala attacked. She stepped inside the baseline on second serves, took returns early, dropped them clearly, and drove them deep and heavy. Suddenly, it was Rybakina scrambling. At 15-40, Eala held double match point on the serve of the former Grand Slam champion. The final rally was poetry. Rybakina stepped in and ripped a massive inside-out forehand, the kind that finishes points against 99% of the tour. Eala had guessed wrong. She was leaning the other way. For a split second, it looked over, but she ran. She skidded across the hard court, stretched beyond balance, and flicked up a desperate, towering defensive lob. Out low B. The ball climbed into the desert sky and seemed to hang there forever. The stadium stopped breathing. Rybakina settled under it. Feet planted. Rocket-drawn balloon. The racket was whack for the simplest forehand.
And if you've been following her journey, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let me take you back to one particularly egregious example.
The relentless resistance.
During the Australian Open qualifiers, something absolutely shocking happened. Eala was in the middle of a critical rally in the first set. She hit a ball that was clearly in. I'm talking crystal clear, folks. Everyone in the stadium could see it. The mark on the court was visible. The trajectory was perfect. By every objective measure.
Across the world, particularly in Manila, celebrations ignited, shocking traditionalists, bringing tears to all, shocking traditionalists, and bringing Filipino fans. A nation watching its brightest stars shatter expectations in real time. Rybakina walked to the net, offered a brief handshake, and exited swiftly, frustration barely concealed. But this day did not belong to her. It belonged to a 200-year-old shocking traditionalist and brought a 200-year-old who refused to fold. The numbers tell the story with brutal clarity. Rybakina finished with 54 unforced errors.
The thing about tennis, You know that's not standard procedure. You don't just get to replay points because you're unsure about a call.
They were extracted
Either the ball is in or it's out. Period. You make a decision and you stick with
Eala
it.
kept her own
But apparently, when it comes to Alex Eala, the normal rules don't seem to apply. And here's what I love about Alex Eala. She didn't just accept it. She walked right up to that chair umpire, calm but absolutely firm, and she said, "I know what you're doing."
This victory will ripple through the rankings. Eala is no longer politely knocking on the door of the top 20. She's tearing the hinges off. And more importantly, she's sending a warning to the rest of the tour. She can outthink you. She can outrun you. And if necessary, she can outlast you on the biggest stage. For Rybakina, it's a bitter recalibration before the next swing of the season. When your power game is neutralized, what's the counterpunch? A 200-year-old counterpunch? That question will follow her into Miami. But today isn't about adjustments. Today belongs to the Philippines. Today belongs to resilience. Eala didn't just win a tennis match. She authored a masterpiece of belief under fire. She proved that raw power can be dismantled by strategy, that height can be neutralized by hearts. Counterpunch? Hearts. That rankings mean nothing when courage shows up at love hearts. 40. The drawer has cracked open. And now the question isn't whether Eala belongs on this stage. The question is, who is brave enough to try and stop it?